Beyond Bigfoot Michigan Rob.
Hey, I'm going to interrupt you real quick, and I'm sorry I did this, brother.
What?
But you forgot to add yourself to the stream to do your intro.
All right.
So I'll drop back by.
I'm going to start over. I'm going to start over. Thank you for that text. I am BMR. This is Beyond BMR. And I did not add myself to the stream per usual. This is a new show that goes beyond Bigfoot Michigan Rob. We dive much deeper down the rabbit hole, taking on subjects beyond our own realms and realities. We will not just cover cryptids, but we'll also look at time travel, alien and UFO existence, strange hauntings, and unexplained phenomena. Tonight I have a great guest, Barry Littleton. We're going down that rabbit hole of time travel. And are we aliens from the future? I don't know. Don't forget to subscribe to Bigfoot Michigan Rob. Subscribe to Texas Front Porch. Subscribe to the Siru Papers with Jason, SIRU Papers. The lovely and talented Jessica Jones, the Cryptid Huntress. Bob Van Buren's Variety. If you want something lighthearted, go check him out. We're on 5 days a week, up to 6 days a week. You can hear us on all of the channels. We're also on iHeart Radio, Odyssey Radio. Thursdays, KPNL Radio with the lovely Aunt Selene. Share us out, subscribe, pass it on to friends. I'm going to bring up Tex before I bring up Barry. Tex, if you're all ready, I'm going to add you to the stream. Tex, buddy, I thank you for that. You know, I was going to delay it just a little bit, and you caught it, and I appreciate it. Tex, I just did some of the introductions for what we got going on our channels across the board, but there's something I did leave out, which I'd like you to make mention of to our audience regarding Texas in the next 2 weeks. Actually, Tex, our whole team is going to be somewhere. And if you'd like to expound on that before we get started.
Yeah, we've got the Jefferson Bigfoot Conference coming up and next weekend. Is that right? The 14th, 15th, and 16th, I believe. And in Jefferson, Texas. Me, Bob, Rob, and Randy, and we're going to go ahead and drag Jason up there with us. Unfortunately, the girls aren't going to be able to join us this trip, but we're going to have most of the team up there. But yeah, it's going to be a good time. We're not speaking as of yet, but as we know from past experiences, you may wake up at 8 o'clock in the morning and be tapped to MC or speak or anything. So
yeah, that's a fascinating. You know, I made my first conference with you and Jason and Jessica was down there. So was Kristen, and yeah, you got prompted into the role as MC, but also Tex. Even though technically, as of right now, we're not speaking, but our group is putting together a nice little get together for our fans. Why don't you elaborate on that just a little bit?
Yeah, 6:30 Saturday night. We're going to go over to the jalapeno tree there in Marshall, Texas, and we're going to have a little meet and greet. So if you can't make the conference, if you can't afford to go to the conference, we understand. But hell, come over and say hello. You know, as Jason says, poke us with a stick, slap us around. But I'm going to tell you real quick, somebody walks up and slaps me in the back of the head because this is Jason's idea. I'm going straight for him. So it's going to be a fun deal because like I said, if you can't make the conference or whatever, and if you can make the drive, but you just come over and say hello. We'd love to meet you. It's kind of it may not seem like it, but we want to look at it as kind of our way of giving back, you know, and meet y'all that support us so much. And y'all just been freaking awesome. I mean, without y'all, Rob, you wouldn't be going to the conference.
No, not at all.
You know,
yeah.
So
and and Tex makes a great point. We since we've been doing this for a while, Tex started his show, his channel, maybe 4 years ago. I could be plus or minus a year. I'm not sure. I just started my channel a year ago. I've been with Tex now for it'll be 2 years. Tex in January. Our first
Crazy,
show
isn't it?
debuted January. It'll be 2 years for us together. And thank you for that, Tex, and thank you to our listening audience. Thank you to
Mhm.
people that listen after the show. Thank you to everybody that comes into our chat. And yeah, I do want to meet a lot of you folks because I think you're all fantastic people. I love each and every one of you for the support that you show to Tex, to Rob, to Jason, to Jessica. Kristen once in a while she's not around, but hey, she's going to be a doctor, so we can't get her all the time. And our good pal Bobby with that small little channel he's got, but it's very entertaining. And again, if you're into lighthearted subject matter, Bob has a nice show. And I got one other piece of announcement to make before we get started here. Tex, I'm Steve Stockton. I can make the announcement. I talked to Steve. He's with Missing Persons Mysteries and 13 Past Midnight. They're YouTube shows. I joined his team as a writer. I'll be writing missing persons stories. I'll be writing true crime and some cryptid stuff. When my writing, my script, as he calls it, debuts, I'll keep you guys posted. But Steve's got a fantastic show. He's got over 250,000 subscribers combined on 2 channels, and he's got a lot. He's got a great, great show. Go check him out. And also for the month of Halloween, for October, Steve has got something on 13 Past Midnight called 31 Nights of Halloween. He's on each and every day. I think after this show he comes on. I'm not sure of the time, but every day he does some creepy stuff with his partner over there. Go check him out if you would, and check out, of course, Tex, Rob, and the rest of us. Now, enough of that. Tex, I'm going to bring up Barry Littleton. I'm going to wait for Barry to get prepped there. I'm watching him, making sure, okay, Barry looks good to go. Barry Littleton, thank you, man, for joining the show tonight with me and Tex.
Hey, greetings. How you doing, Rob, Tex? Appreciate you both having me. I'm honored, so I'm looking forward to it.
Well,
You're beginning to be a pretty regular staple around the Texas front porch.
That's interesting. I didn't think anyone would still be interested in anything I had to say. So the fact that I'm still in these communities at this point really blows me away. So,
and I'm going to get started by saying, everybody, after this show, and again, I can't do it here where I'm sitting. Maybe we've got some of our blue wrenches out there can do it. Barry Little, your YouTube channel, Barry, is what? It's simply called Barry Littleton. Is that correct?
Yeah. Sadly, no handles or anything cool.
But but that's fine because you guys, he's got like almost 10,000 subscribers, and I tell you what, he's got fascinating things, fascinating material. And Barry, thanks to Jessica several months ago, that's how I met you. I saw you with Jessica on the show. I seen you on Spaced Out Radio with Jessica. You were on Spaced Out Radio with Dave, and you joined me in Tex for a show. And the show could have went 5 hours. And this new show, Beyond BMR, we try to get really deep. It's a totally different genre. The genre is the same, yet the quality, the show is a little different. We're not really talking encounters. And again, from speaking from me, we're not presenting like all the hardline evidence of facts. This is an open-minded show where the what if this, what if that. And I've always wondered about what if time travel. I've always liked time travel. I've been into it. You've got a lot of great videos on that. And before we get into the meat of the show, Barry, why don't you just give us, like I like to do for all our guests on any of the shows I do with Tex, is why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and how you got involved with High Strangeness?
Well, it started off, I was one of those strange people who was kind of born with past life memories. And, that kind of augments your life from childhood on. And I started having experiences when I was a child too. And, you don't quite know what that is at the time. Things, whether it be with star beings, extraterrestrials, or ghost earthbound spirits, both seem to come into my field of perception quite a bit. So a lot of my life was spent trying to just research and trying to find the hard science to back up what was happening to me and just trying to understand it. And I can say that since coming forward and being put on the platform, the small one that I'm on, I've talked to many, many contactees and experiencers. And I always thought that around between, 75, 80% of our population has had some type of contact and is mostly unaware of it. And so far, I've seen very little to discourage that thought and that thought process. So that's a lot of it. But just most of my life was trying to understand what was happening to me and trying to get to the bottom of it, the foundation of it, and what's happening to our world right now, and especially why so many of us don't even have fragmented past life memories and soul life memories when we're immortal souls. So that's kind of where I'm coming from on it. In a nutshell, I guess.
Well, yeah, again, you're very diverse, and we're going to get into it if we have time permitting, maybe a little later we'll talk about contact, because as you know, you're well aware of Tex had some contact. You made mention to me some time back that you think that I've had contact. But the crux of this show right now to get rolling is about time travel. And I'm going to start with a basic question, okay? That maybe you can help us through, or we can just dissect it. Do you think that we can go into the future? Do you think that we can go back into the future? Not like the movie, well, maybe like the movie, but do you think that exists out there, Barry? Do you think that time travel is relevant?
Yeah, I think that more what we're dealing with now is especially time edits and the timelines being messed with. But time travel is definitely possible. And I don't, for the human race, I think it only goes so far, but something to especially pay attention to when it comes to humanity and what we're dealing with, something we can see scientifically, is what's called the superluminal propagation of information, which is basically sending information backwards through time. And, they're doing that now. And you can see some of the types of time devices that are coming on the market openly. There's a brother from the University of Connecticut, Dr. Ron Mallett. He's working on something that deals with these light beams. He's trying to make a machine out of this, but it's circulating light beams and using lasers is what he's using. But that's another way that is possible, time science that makes this possible. So that's one thing that can be traced. And if you want to talk about people messing with timelines, if you can just even have people like you and I in the private sector sending information back, superluminal, like I just said, we got a lot of problems that can come up with what happened and what histories we're dealing with and all sorts of stuff. Mm-hmm. So anyway, but so I think it's more what methods can be used. Like, for example, the Earth itself produces what's called frame dragging, okay? And that can create what's called closed time-like curves. And these are where our timelines can be edited. And we're actually, these things can get different. That makes sense to a degree. So, yeah, I think that maybe sometimes we think about the technologies as opposed to what we're seeing on TV as much, but connecting this with the contact experience, the beings that I've dealt with, I'm convinced one portion of them are definitely trying to do something with the timelines. I call them the temporal commission, because I think they're trying to stop the timelines from being polluted.
I don't claim to be a scholar, right? I went to University of Michigan, studying business. And since I've been doing this, and I've always been interested in science, I've always been interested in life on other planets, Bigfoot, everything, the whole rabbit hole. Again, so I'm going to read something really quick. I picked up from Einstein. Now, a lot of people I talk to says we really can't go into the past. Whether you believe that or not, we can discuss that. But he says, talking about the theory of relativity, speaks about time being affected by gravity, right? So, in essence, he's saying that gravity has the propensity to slow down time. With that being said, if we can slow down time, can that actually open an avenue where we, as not we, us guys, but scientists or researchers, does that open a slip, since it's slowing down, that we can go back into time? And if so, how will we travel there?
Well, that would be the way, the frame drag that the Earth produces. And, that goes all the way to how, if you remember, they started talking years ago when they put all those satellites out, how the satellites were being off each year for like a minute or something. They get out of orbit. That has to do with that frame drag and those time-like curves. So that's got something to do with it right there. Scientifically, they even discovered a few years ago something called electron diffuse regions, which are between the magnetic fields of the sun and the earth. Right between them are these doors that open. I think they timed them at every so many minutes they open. But these, when we talk about, portals and dimensional things, these are things that science backs up to a degree. So it's worth, always looking into. These are issues. These are things, if you're a type 1, 2, or 3 civilization, bending time, and I think messing with time is elementary. I think only for us here, the type 0 civilization that's still using fossil fuels, destroying our biosphere, is dealing with that, Does that make sense? Does that answer your question?
Well, it does. I mean, again, it does. Again, I'm a novice in this, and that's why I had you on the show for tonight, because I like to have a broader show. But what I'm thinking now, let's say that we can travel back in time. Don't you think that, though, if that's possible, don't you think that creates like paradoxes in the dimension that could prove dangerous for the future? You can't go back and stop. If you go back in the 1950s and come up with a cure for, say, polio, which we have a cure for, if we had found that traveling back in the past and we had a cure and no one died of polio, doesn't that set the planes that we're living on right now? Doesn't it take our world into just another spectrum?
It could also be the question of, does that whole grandfather paradox exist? And when you go back into the past, you become part of the past. And then if you change anything, the future that you come to is a different timeline. It's not where we're at right now. You know what I mean? So that's another thing that kind of raises a question there as well. Is if how much can you actually change something, and does it change your own future only for you, not for everyone else? You know what I mean?
So I guess you're talking like parallel times, right? Parallel timelines, 2 different lines. So,
well, again, I think when you go back into the past on our own timeline,
right,
and you start changing things, the future you return to is not the same future. It's a different timeline. So, it's not this one. And I don't think it changes the existence of us on this timeline, though. But for you that does that, you know what I mean? That's what I think the difference is. So and that takes us into the possibility of how many timelines are there.
Okay, okay, that does answer the question. But then if you look further, let's say I went on my timeline and I went back 20 years ago and decided, you know what, I recognize what the future holds, and I got a different degree at school. That's my timeline. What about a researcher or scientist? Isn't there like maybe a global timeline that maybe it's not his timeline? If there was a discovery of something that could definitely alter mankind. So if that makes sense, I'm more of a global effect, or is everybody's timeline their own?
I'll give you an example. When it comes to that, I'll take it a little different prospect on that aspect. I believe that there are wars, the timelines are trying to jump us to different timelines. Like, let me give you an example. I believe that one of these timelines is nuclear war. It always comes up. And these, everyone talks about the Mandela Effect now. You hear about that so much. Mandela Effect, it's a common term, but really, what is it? Really, it's a time edit. And these time edits tend to happen during times of high solar flare activity. And we're in one now, pretty high solar activity right now. So I'm watching a lot of things. You know what I mean? Like, example, 9/11 happened during a high solar activity cycle. And when we think about 9/11, do you remember that at that time Manhattan was in the middle of a Hurricane Aaron? Do you recall that? Most people don't. Mm-mm. Yeah, it's interesting. Somebody told me that's not true. I said, look it up on NOAA, and they did. They said, well, I don't remember that. And I lived in that area at the time. I just don't remember that. I said, yeah, a couple of days air traffic was shut down because of that hurricane. But somehow on 9/11, it was just clear skies. And then that happens, so it's things like that that make me very, very leery. And there's a lot of us that are sensitive to these little time edits, something like you've been going the same way to work for years and years. And on this way, what color this building is or this house is. And all of a sudden it's like it's on the other side of the street or the parking lot and it's a different color, or it's just a different color. You're thinking, how in the world could they have changed that quick? And there's little things like that go beyond just the Mandela Effect or the Berenstain Bears and stuff like that. There's a lot of other things that kind of are the chance of us picking up on that.
Okay.
Is that what? Well, even Jessica is the glitch in the matrix type thing. Is that kind of what we're seeing? The same thing?
Yeah, I think so. I think that also has to do with, honestly, that our reality is so much not what it appears to be, and especially when dealing with these different technologies, even from what I think humanity dealt with in the past. And sometimes it might be a misconception to think that ancient man was so primitive. Something else went on here. We've got the relics that still show that, So yeah, these glitches like that, and these time skips could be considered that, definitely. But I think one of these glitches they're trying to throw us to is this nuclear war thing. And I'm hoping that doesn't happen, and our consciousness is enough at this point to deviate from that, Something I want to pick up too, I just want to touch on.
Yes.
Time science or time technologies that exist in the private sector. Okay, that's extreme. And the real-time science and things that we don't hear anything about. Okay, and I think when sometimes we have people that get in the vicinity of some of these time technologies, one of the residual side effects is deja vu. I think, it's not the only explanation for deja vu, but I do believe it's one, definitely. And it's things like that worry me, because the private sector we don't know anything what's happening there. And you've got so many advanced different types of time science. Now you've got these quantum computers. I'd had somebody a couple of years ago sent me a message and started talking, and they dealt with a lot of this for corporations. They said, have you actually seen a quantum computer? At that time, I hadn't, I thought it probably just looked something like maybe a really nice laptop with super megs on it or something, or maybe even like War Games with Patrick Broderick, the Whopper,
Right.
But in reality, when I actually saw one, and it was the one IBM had put out, I was shocked. And you know what it looked like to me? It looked like, if you're familiar with Doctor Who, the thing in the middle of the TARDIS that goes up and down, a quantum computer looks somewhat similar to that. And when you start thinking about this and the computers that are needed to actually manage these time-like curves and the things we've already talked about, and just time dilation and things of that nature, it's fascinating where we're probably going with this. But it needs to be looked at, and there needs to be disclosure. As far as time technology goes, there needs to be real disclosure, and there is not. So that concerns me.
When you talk about slowing down time, right, with these, and maybe to cite another example, how does this time slow on these alternative planes? How does the time slowing down alter like the time on a ticking clock? The clock to me is always going to be running. It's always going to be going forward. As we sit here today, I look at my clock and it's ticking.
Well, you've got time dilation. Time dilation can happen. That's when the clock is actually off, and that's similar to that satellite thing I just mentioned. When they all get off because of the frame drag of the Earth changes it, and that creates this. The frame drag creates this like, okay, let's say it's a circle here, like this crystal. But the frame drag is actually here as Earth turns. And it's within that, these closed time-like curves. That's where time both can be slowed and sped up within curved time-like curves, closed time-like curves like that. So that's kind of that, what you see. And I think that it's not maybe the dilation, the effect is what you're referring to, I think, as opposed to just actual time travel itself. So.
Because I think they're all kind of related with that. And I was just wondering on what the effect it is on that. It's kind of like, when we talk about gravity, I read somewhere that in relation to time travel, not are we talking about time slips and these glitches, but does this gravity, when we talk gravity a little bit earlier, does that have the ability to bend space and time? Like a wormhole? Like the bending of space and time, like a wormhole. Is that like a part of these slips?
Yeah, it could be. It could be. Sorry, I was looking at the very interesting comments on the side.
Yeah, I'm actually starring a bunch of the comments. So yeah.
Yeah, I want to give a shout out to that young brother Brown Dwarf. He does great work. Anyway, when dealing when dealing with wormholes, that takes us more into kind of also the black hole concept of what they call MACOs, magnetically eternally collapsing objects. So that too, could lead to different types of time dilation and things. But once you go that far, I think you start dealing more with the universal principle as opposed to just the time principle, And I often wonder, because we always so much easily throw around these words, oh, it's a different dimension. Sasquatch is interdimensional, from a different dimensional. Well, what is the other dimension like? Really? What are they like as beings there? Are they unmanifested? Do they have physical bodies? Is it similar to this dimension? See, these things aren't really elaborated on. We just throw the terms around. You know what I mean? How much mass and space there is in this dimension, this other dimension that they can utilize? Or are they unmanifested beings in this dimension?
Okay.
Food for thought.
No, it is, Barry. You had mentioned Ron Mallett, and I was just reading some things that he had written. And when it came to this whole topic, and why I'm kind of going back to this slowing of time in the past, is he makes mention that he thinks that we can, when we're talking about bending space, time and space, he's made mention that we can actually twist. We have the ability today, or maybe not, to actually twist time and space. So he was saying, from what I understood it, if you twist time and space, that is also can reverse the effect of time travel, or not prohibit, but make it proceed forward. Does that make sense to you? Have you heard anything like that?
Yeah. The twisting of time and the turning. That's similar there to what I was saying. He's that device he's using uses the circulating light beams, and that's a circulating actually the space itself. Think of it in a way like Star Trek beamed somebody up, but it would be different. It would be more of a time type of transport as well. Yeah, and there's other ways to do that too. Twisting of time and the warping of space. The warping of space is another way to not just take you as distance in Star Trek, but also kind of like the Doctor Who TARDIS. What the TARDIS actually does is jump through wormholes itself too on the time level. So it's very, very interesting when you go into that. Like I said before, when we start dealing with star intelligences and the abduction phenomenon, a lot of these beings can bend the space-time continuum. So it's like all bets are off. You know what I mean? But there's several different time science methods to bend and twist space and time, like what you're saying. And even the frame drag of Earth itself is supposed to naturally produce that closed time-like curves in that system as well. So that's something that's I'll try to make it where it makes sense, hopefully, and not just
it makes sense. And this show's about exploring these things. I'm a novice at it, and I like to learn about it. I'm open-minded to everything, and I got a lot of things going through my head that I like to ask you. But before I hand it up and ask all the questions, Tex, what's your thoughts on this?
Well, I was thinking about when, of course,
really quick, wink at me. Thank you, honey, or guy. Thank you very much.
She's a sweetheart. Of course, Barry, you're very familiar with what's happened to me, and the hours that were lost there. I'm still trying to get my head wrapped around what went on. And is that kind of what we're seeing, where they can manipulate that, and that's why they can set you down and you don't really notice anything? Or is it something, or do you think it's some kind of forget-me-not drug that they're giving you? You know,
I think it's the technology that they have is the ability to give you what is the missing time type of thing, you know, and that's what really led me to explore a lot more of my experiences, because I actually always like I was Mr. Conscious Experiencer, because I could remember a lot of it was physical and conscious, but then there was all this missing time. You know what I mean? And that really throws one off. So I think it's definitely the technology to a degree that they're using and bending the space-time continuum. If you're familiar with who Mary Rodwell is, when I first became interested in her research, was she started doing a research over lifetime contactees who have these horrible traumatic events, which they recover from in a speedy way that they shouldn't. And what that involves is people getting, like, let's say a car accident, and the star beings, whoever they are, bust in and pull the person out of the accident for just a few seconds and then put them back. Okay. And I took an interest in that because in 2010, in fact, just the anniversary on that a couple of days ago for me, that I took a horrible car accident and I took 4 catastrophic traumatic brain injuries. And I died on the way to the hospital, and I was in a coma for a couple of weeks. And after that, it took about a month for me to remember who I was. But when I did, and before I got discharged, a lot of doctors around me, they're saying things like, you know, you recovered really quickly and your recovery is going great. And we're trying to figure out, like, you went through all those windows, why you didn't lose your teeth and things like that. You know what I mean? So I took an interest in her work saying that, because I had a lot of those symptoms in my own experience and my own things, and not being a mental vegetable, a cognitive vegetable right now shows there's more going on that meets the eye, you know?
So you think they intervene, what a lot of people would call divine intervention. Mm-hmm. You think some of that is not divine intervention? Well, I guess you could say it is in a way, but, you know, not as not in that context.
Yeah, at that level, I don't know if it matters, Tex, you know, whether if it's star beings or angelics, because I think they're all doing the same thing with the creator and the divine field. So at that point, it might not matter, you know, but I know I had a lot of help. But when I had passed, I died, or well, at least when I had started to recover, I could still see it in my mind's eye. I had this near-death experience, you know, and it was very much, one is I saw loved ones. And it wasn't like some vision. It's about like I'm talking to you right now, both of you. And the other thing I saw these angels, I think doesn't quite describe them. There's a word in the Uranta book called supernanaphim, which is a higher type of angel that's way up there like an archangel. But I think that's what I saw. And these weren't physical beings. These were corpuscles of light, beautiful things that were full of so much love. A little bit more, I think, would have burned me up. So when I recovered, I had to, you know, try to understand and kind of compare and contrast these angelic forms I saw in death with some of these non-physical star beings I've dealt with on these craft that have this feeling that will make you elated too. There's something about them too, this love frequency coming off of them. So, I mean, that's things I was trying to figure out, especially when you're dealing with beings that are all non-physical. It's like, what the heck? You don't even got to lie about this crap, man. So it's weird, you know?
So, but before this accident, were you in this subject at all? Or
yes.
I get when was the point, or was there a point in your life where you had that aha moment that turns you on to this?
No, always, because that stuff started happening to me when I was a kid. Gotcha. And I couldn't explain it, and then I follow from there. Yeah. But I will say this, although a lifetime of researching it and always being on it and having experiences till I was 30, you know, And then even after that, at that ranch place out there. But anyway, that forced me to come forward. I was never going to tell anyone about my I talked to big game, like the 1 or 2 people in my family I might have told, or my best friend. I'm going to write a book one day. I'm going to talk about this. But fellas, the truth is I really wasn't, man. I wasn't going to really say anything. I was going to keep hiding. And one of those people that watches YouTube and all that and never comments or anything, I was one of those brothers. All right. And then I had this accident and I got thrown on Front Street for the near-death experience I'd had. The first was my home state asked me to do a presentation over near-death experience to all these doctors and nurses. And I hadn't spoken in front of people for so long, you know what I mean? They said I wouldn't be cognitive anymore, so I was still dealing with all that, you know? But the truth is, it's what kind of got me to come forward. If it was not for that accident, believe me, I was fine without it. But if it was not for that and the near-death experience, I never would have come forward and be trying to help people in this way. I just would have kept doing it professionally with my career, you know?
You know, Bear, I'm still trying to get my hands wrapped around this parallel universe. Will you just describe then with what happened to you with your experience? Would that then be a parallel universe? I mean, seeing what you saw, but it was on to me, it sounds like it was 2 different planes, right?
Yeah. Wow. That's a good question. You know, as far as seeing, you mean the angelics?
Yeah.
Seeing them? Yeah, I would, man, they definitely weren't physical. They were all light. And for the time I was in the coma, I'd spent a lot of time trying to figure out what was the last air in my brain processing when I died and other things that might explain the phenomenon that I actually saw. And all I can say is reality is real to the perceiver. Had I not survived and come back here, I would have been there with them. And that reality is serious. You know, I've tried to see some things, but I can't, you know, everything of like what I might have seen in the coma, but some things seem almost dreamlike, and you're like, who were those people? Who was that? You know, I don't know. It's very interesting, you know, but the brain is a serious device. And when looking, something I'll throw in, you talked about parallel universes. Actually, when dealing, you know, with the universe concept, a lot of a different universe will be based on something different than ours. Our universe is based on the spin, you know, all the way from the electron, the molecules, all the way up to the planets, to the galaxies themselves. Everything is spherical here. Now you go to another universe that might not be spherical. It might be based on the pyramid or on the cube or on amorphous metals, something of that nature. So what the life there might be like is completely different. I think that our perceptions of other universal technology, intelligences and existence is not nearly expansive enough. And that's
really?
Something I learned dealing with some of these astrophysicists that took interest in some of my encounters.
And not to interject, Duke Sullivan says, "Hey, Barry," he wanted me to give that shout out. So there you go, Duke, to Barry.
Wow, that's very cool. I'm honored. Thank you. Appreciate you. Every time I see a Gugwe or anything that deals how that's coming up so much, I always think about him. He's the first person I saw that actually gave an account of that beyond Native American folklore, you know. Right. So Duke is the walking encyclopedia when it comes to cryptids. I do give him that, known him for several years now. And
hopefully we're going to have him on the porch Monday.
So, no, I have not contacted him. You know, I've been busy. I did see that. I did rewatch the show the other night, Tex, and I did see that. And I will certainly reach out to Mr. Sullivan.
So, Barry,
go ahead, Tex.
When you were in the coma, do you remember anything about anything?
Very, very few things, very fleeting things. And I can't say what about that is solid due to the fact that how much of it was my brain responding to external stimuli. And I'm trying to compartmentalize it. And I'll tell you why I say that. Before my mother had passed in 2014, she had told me, because she said, you refer to your near-death experience, and you always say that when you had this, what I had was what's called a clearing out, which is when for a brain injury patient, everything returns and comes back. And when I had this near-death experience with my uncle and my grandmother I was talking to, and I come up in this rehab bed at this for fall risk rehab bed, excuse me. And for me, that's when I kind of, at least I remembered who I was, but that's where I remembered this near-death experience. When my mother died, she said, you always say that like that's when that happened to you. She said, whatever happened to you right after the accident. Because when they finally told us that you were conscious, your eyes would just roll in your head once a day for like a minute or two. But they said you were conscious. But when you first started mumbling things, you started talking about these angels and about my uncle Reggie, who I encountered. He had just died. We just buried him 2 days before my accident. And I saw him when I was dead, but when I had died, but this process, but it's odd. That I definitely remember, but that would have been during the time you're asking about, Tex, that happened. But chronologically, as a survivor, it was hard for me to put it in the chronological time slot. But I know whatever happened to me was just after the accident. So being in the coma,
when somebody's in a coma, they urge people to, oh wow, Rhonda, they urge people to communicate with them because there's a possibility that they can hear them on, maybe not like we hear each other, but at another level almost. And I have to wonder if that stems from trying to get across to the person that's in the coma that you're still here. You're still on this plane with us. Don't let go.
Boy, it's interesting you say that. My siblings are much older than me. My oldest sibling is 65, almost 66, and the other is just turned 60. And he told me, he said, when you were in that coma, man, you were laying there. He goes, I was back there. I was telling you, he goes, man, it was so odd. He said, I could feel you, but it's like you were above your body. I was telling you, don't leave, man. Don't just take off and go out there or go so far you can't come back. He goes, I kept saying that to you again and again. He said, and then finally you twitched a little. I say, you must have heard me. So stuff like that really makes you accept that. And I'll tell you something else, that when I came back from this near-death experience, a lot of people ask what I saw, how it went, yada, yada. But I can tell you something I learned about it. One is the panoramic life review. Your life flashes in front of your eyes. You feel everything that you put out and give back. And, in that way, I thought I was, okay, when I come home from after school and the G.I. Joe and all the after school special, it was a golden rule. So I always try to live by the golden rule and do unto others like that I want to be done. All right. But still, even with that and being a little bit spiritually aware, I very much underestimated the impact that our relationships have on each other. It's everything. And it's what really goes to the other side. If you're somebody that screws people over all the time, doing that dark stuff, that comes back on you a millionfold. You feel that stuff. That's enough to scare people back into an incarnation here or an incarnation of vibration lower than this. No thanks. And the same way you can get hit. If you're a loving person doing all this good stuff, you get hit with that a million times and it can bliss you out and stop your ascending towards the creator. So these are little things that I think the Bardo Thodol, the Tibetan Book of the Dead, addresses that are somewhat true about the death process. And I can only speak of what I kind of encountered. Okay. I can't speak for everybody. I think it's different for everybody. I had somebody tell me, weren't you the butterfly going through the valley? No, I wasn't. Sorry.
Yeah. Because you hear a lot about people, like you said, your brother had commented, he felt like you were above your body. You hear a lot of the people that have the near-death experience having that sensation like they're above their body and they're watching everything. And they pick up details that they couldn't have seen. They weren't conscious at that point. The way doctors are dressed, what was said, that type of thing. And that's always amazed me, because that is, I think that to me, that is that point to where you're either going, I think that's it's you've got a glimpse of the other side and you want to go, but the man upstairs, it's not your time yet.
Thank you, Steve Wolf.
Maybe that's that transition period to where that happens or not, or don't. You know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. When I saw my uncle who had just passed, like I said, it wasn't like a vision. I was talking to him, but we were at this apartment complex that my grandmother and him both had apartments in. And, there was like a tree in the wrong part of the yard is the only thing that was wrong with it. But I didn't recognize this as some type of an odd experience, right. Until he's talking to me. And he was kind of muscular brother. Okay. And he's got on this bib overalls with these Birkenstocks and this straw hat. So it looked like a Huckleberry Finn hat. It looked ridiculous. And, I kept looking like, why in the world is he dressed like that? And he keeps talking to me, saying these things, and he's, it's kind of making me feel odd. And finally, he says, I say, what's wrong with you? Why are you dressed like that? And he looks at me, says, they all call me B. He says, the problem is, B, I crossed over, and you just can't remember it right now. But if you have another accident like the one you did have, and you'll be here with us. And he points to my grandmother, who's standing probably 10 feet behind us with her best friend. And she never said anything. She's kind of looking around like this, like an owl, And I looked at him, I said, there's nothing wrong with me. I kind of slapped my chest and my legs. I said, there's something wrong with you dressed like this. And I jumped back a little bit, and he goes, you're not all right, B. You're not even close to all right. You just can't remember it right now. And he said something else, and I can't tell you what that was, but it scared me. And I come up in this fall wrist bed, remembering everything. But I was like, what the hell happened? I was just on my way to work. But it'd been, a month and a half by then. But I didn't. Right. So just a situation like that. So that's all I can describe to you. But that part of the near-death experience was really a trip, because it was, and I wonder if really the reason why he was able to talk to me like I can talk to you now is because he was not as far in the death process as my grandmother and her best friend that had been gone, 30 some years 35 years by then. But he was just a few days into it, and I was only halfway there. I wasn't fully there. I couldn't have been, So anyway, I hope that answers your question in a very long, drawn out, put you to sleep fashion, my friends.
I'm definitely not sleeping. I know Tex isn't, and I certainly know that our listening audience is not sleeping. You got some great feedback already, Barry. And staying on this death for just a moment, and I don't want to go back to your experience, but when we're talking about time travel and everything, and these alternative parallel universes or what have you, if someone's laying on a gurney, and again, your opinion, what your thoughts are, and let's say that their soul, let's just call it the soul, leaves the body, you see the light ahead, and now they're being spoken to, right? Like we've heard many stories, reached out from the fathers, mothers, or maybe some other entity that they can't put their finger on. So you're laying on the gurney, and time stops for you, your mortal body, your physical body, yet your energy is now being released. Now, in these parallel universes, and you're getting all this information while you're looking back perhaps on yourself, and you're floating wherever you are. In some cases, and you talked about darkness, can that be so too with these universes, these dimensions, where, let's say, when you're leaving the physical body, that you are given false information? In other words, they're twisting you to thinking something that you shouldn't, to whether or not you want to go back or go beyond?
Wow. What a fascinating question, my friend. I'm going to answer that, but I don't know if it's the answer. I'm trying to put in a way what you're.
I don't know what you're going to say.
Well, this takes me into the work I do with earthbound spirits and crossing over earthbound spirits, those that are outside of people's energy field and those that are within also that are not very easy to detect. All right. And why a lot of them, part of the process of me crossing them over is I asked them why they didn't go into the light when they died, how they died, and why they didn't go into the light. And a lot of times the reasons that I will hear are, one, they didn't know what it was. Two, they felt cheated. Or three, they've screwed people over and thought they're going to go to hell. It might be hell. They might go in there and burn. Okay, so these concepts stop people from crossing over. And also, people right now, we hear in these communities, especially people saying, oh, whatever happens, don't go into light. When you die, don't go into light. Listen for a sound or do this, do that. And these are people that aren't mediums. They haven't had the near-death experience, and they haven't worked with a caseload of earthbound spirits. They're just listening to somebody else and doing stuff, telling stuff that will keep people as earthbound spirits trapped here. Now, answer to what you were saying, Rob, what I believe is when the death process occurs, what I've experienced through these earthbound spirits, I think it's a lot like when you've been asleep for 8 or 10 hours, okay, really good deep sleep, REM sleep and beyond. That alarm goes off, you hit the alarm, and for about the first minute, you're kind of, you're just groggy, and then you get up, get your coffee or whatever, get along with your day. But during the death process, when we come out of these bodies, we're disoriented for a minute. There's a lot of shock that comes with that. And all these earthbound spirits describe the shock to me, okay, and how that is enough to even run from the light and get away from it, But anyway, so when we talk about universes, I'll talk about the light more or less. All right. So that's the reason. But during the time we first come out of that sleep, that shock of death, I think there are others that can come for us also and present things that are traps, tricks, perhaps a false light. We hear about that so much. So use your discernment. What's the light of the moon feel like? What's the light of the sun feel like? What's the life-giving light? Where's your discernment at? You know what I mean? Keep these concepts within the personality and the mind during crossing. I think it's very, very important. When seeing others go into the light, they're no longer jumping on people, living through people, jumping on people's body parts or any of these things like that, or roaming around here. Like one of them told me, said, I don't want to talk about God. You say, why not? Well, because if there was a God, we wouldn't all be trapped here and you all wouldn't be ignoring us. And that gives you a clue to how many earthbound spirits are actually down here. I think they're more numerous than the living. It's really serious, and I'm not kidding around.
So, Jason tells a story that a friend of his during a funeral that there was this huge black dog that walked into the church and almost exuded evil and guarded the coffin. And he's pretty much convinced that whoever, I can't remember who died, but from what I understand, he wasn't the best person in the world. That may have been a hellhound or what have you that was taking him not up but down. So, have you with your experience with these earthbound spirits and everything, and I think we kind of tapped into this when you were explaining this. Have you recognized that half of it, the darkness side of it, or
I'm dealing with the earthbound spirit level I've dealt with. I treat them, these are mostly people, right. Like grandma didn't cross over, but I'm not really going quite down to the demonic level at that point, which is definitely there. But bringing up what you brought up, Tex, I think it's fascinating. It's something that's really struck me abruptly in the last couple of months, especially since I've been interacting with you two and Jessica, is the amount of the dog thing that's coming up now. Not just dog men, but hellhounds, Wahila, which is a very large wolf, and also things that were called Gabriel's hounds, which is something similar to what you're talking about there. And and these and every time I've heard them, even with the dog men, everything except for maybe Saint Christopher, it's always associated with negativity and evil. Mm-hmm. And I will tell you something I've heard from people, and the first time I heard it was from Malachi Martin, the exorcist from the Vatican. He was the one to talk about this, and I heard other people talking about it. These dogs with human faces. And when Jessica just did her video or the show about the that woman with the dog head or whatever, I kept thinking about that. But these dogs with human faces always come along with torturing people, haunting people, you know, and they're described as being physical dogs, not just some astral thing. So yeah, and and I don't know if that's maybe the time we're at right now, where these beings are really manifesting now, or what's going on, you know, or is it a government thing underground? They're being made. What the heck is this?
Well, you know, and there's a lot of talk about us being in the time of revelation, you know, right now, and have been for years. And maybe this is, we may need Jason for this conversation, but maybe this is a form of those seals opening up. You know, maybe that's what we're seeing. You know.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's definitely something going on. You know, definitely, I kind of tried to find out like how many dogmen encounters were associated with attacks. And I didn't come up with a whole lot of them, but I maybe I wasn't looking deep enough. I don't know. But
there hasn't been that many.
Well, sorry, what's that?
There hasn't been that many as far as physical attacks go. You know, a lot of them are just like mine. They run across the road, they get growled at. But some of them, a lot of them, it's not necessarily an attack. It's them just messing with you, you know, tapping on the window, you know, or something like that, or harassing people. Seems like they get their jollies out of it for some reason, you know, versus the Bigfoot, you know, they'll slap the house. They'll, you know, look in the window every once in a while. But these canine creatures, for some reason, seem to take it to a new level. And I don't know what that's all about. But it's like when I saw mine, everybody talks about, or a lot of people talk about the dogman sickness. And that's that form, that feeling of dread that you get. I didn't get that. And I've talked to a lot of people that didn't get that, you know, but I've talked to some that have. I think there's good and bad, you know, and it's very possible that the ones that exude that are what we're talking about right now, you know?
Yeah. That darkness, you know, sorry, Rob, I think we're getting all off time travel here.
No. I mean, no, I think it all circles back.
Well, here's the thing again, you know? Barry, you'll find Barry. No, we'll still keep on topic, but to me though, as Tex is saying, and we've been saying this, if you watch any of our programs, we believe it's a big circle. It all starts, it all revolves. It's all one thing. Agreed. And Tex was even saying, I was going to throw out a dogman thing. I get encounter stories sent in to me, and this is not unique to anybody. Some of the stories that I've read from people that say, hey, Rob, can you tell my encounter story on your channel? And I do. And when it comes down to the dogman one, you know, Bigfoot, hey, he does his thing. He goes away. But half the time they have these dogman encounters. It's always like, it scares them. And what it does, and I always get this, not always, maybe 50%. Let's just throw that for semantics. They always get a look at this thing, looking straight in their eyes. And, you know, it's got the snout. Most of them have the snout. It looks like that oversized wolf's head or Doberman Pinscher or German Shepherd, whatever. But it always manages to give them that sinister grin, like he's smiling at them. And a lot of these people have even been reported to say that they got this feeling like, don't worry, your day is coming. Something evil. I'm not saying dogman's evil, but a lot of the accounts I come across, that's what I get. Not any about, like, let's say, our friend Bigfoot, right? I don't hear much about Bigfoot unless it's not Bigfoot, and that's a whole nother topic.
Yeah, you know,
yeah, I guess your head's
it's fascinating. Because so often, you know, when I start hearing about dogmen, I started trying to look around, asking who I could, and I started hearing so much about. A lot of times, Sasquatch would warn tribes that there are dogmen in the area, and then how the Sasquatch would leave an area when the dogmen starts coming around. So, I mean, you know, I hear different things all the way around, but it makes you really wonder, Is there a problem there? And when you start dealing with these cryptids that were made, and I don't think they were made necessarily right now in this era. We talking about when type 1 civilization was here. We have all these different type of hominids that are coming out of the fossil record right now. You know, so there's no reason we could just disqualify Sasquatch and the others, but how many and how many things, you know, because every time I hear someone give a dogman account, it almost a similar thing is said. But you understand, this was something that wasn't supposed to exist. This was something from the movies. I mean, all different types that are seen. It's always that. This is something from the movies. I find that fascinating, how much of this is implanted and where the negativity begins and ends. And I think I would agree that if we were going to talk about those seals being broken and things like that, you know, you've got things like these hum sounds that are being heard, all these cryptids being seen, you know, these time skips and all this stuff that seems to be converging right now at the time of these pole shifts. So I think that's worthy, you know. And I don't know. I just I don't know. It's a shame, I think, that so much negativity is attached to the canine when it comes to paranormal. That's too bad, you know.
No, yeah, that is. And, you know, in my opinion, and Tex to speak on it, I think I've never seen a dog man. People that speak to me about dog man, or what I read about dog man, or watch other people's shows or videos on dog man, it ain't no dog, right? It's not our pet. I mean, it could be, you know, it reminds me of, if you saw the movie, and I'm sure you did, Pet Cemetery, where they they put the cat away, but they put any animal that they had that passed on, and they took them to that cemetery. When they came back, they did not look like their pet. It did not look nice. It was frightening. I mean, a Doberman Pinscher or a German Shepherd would certainly look frightening if they were described in that movie. And I think that's kind of what, not seeing a dog man, I'm thinking that's what they're looking at, especially when it just gives you that grin. You know, it's like, hey, don't worry, I got your number, buddy. Maybe not today. Something to worry about down the road. And that's what I think they like to do. Some of them, again, not all of them. For people listening, no, I'm not anti-dog man. I think there's good and bad and everything. But I tell you what.
Excuse me, Rob, wasn't you and Jessica like a week or two ago were doing a show and you were talking about these animal attacks? Yeah, and a lot of them were these dog attacks.
Yeah, we did.
You know, you had mentioned something. I was listening to that. You had mentioned coming into contact with some dogs that looked like they were suffering from mange, but they weren't.
I did.
You know, something like that has happened to me. And I was convinced that I came into contact with what was a skinwalker. It's been probably about 8-9 years ago. And this thing comes across me at 3:00 in the morning in the middle of the city. And it looked like a hairless dog, like almost one of the Mexican hairless dogs, but bigger. This thing was the size of like a Doberman Pinscher, and it was not mange. This thing was muscular. It was in great shape. And its eyes were glowing. I could tell you because of the light, the way they hit it. But the way this thing, I thought it was going to come up on me and come across the bridge, but it didn't. It kept going. And I mean, you know, when you see something that just stops your world, that was one of those. And when I heard you kind of mention the way these dogs looked, it was just somewhat similar. So I can't tell you if it was a skinwalker or what, but.
Well, if for people did not hear that really briefly, I live by a creek, and my friend lives 3 blocks up the road, and I always take the creek when I walk to his house. And right before you get to the end of the trail with the creek, there's kind of a little cul-de-sac. It's open, and, you know, you could have a picnic there. It's kind of spacious, but it's still surrounded by the woods. And at my woods, when I say woods, you guys, it's woods on the right and left side of the creek that flows through my entire subdivision into my city and county. So it's not like the forest, but it's there. So anyways, I'm walking. It's dusk. It's about 6:30 in the afternoon. This is several years ago, and I'm walking to my buddy's house, and I hear this howling and kind of like growling. And I'm walking right down this strip of creek where I'm coming up on, where I'm hearing these sounds, and right around the cul-de-sac, as I turn, there's like 4 or 5 dogs. Some are standing on all fours, some are sitting down, and they are howling, and not barking and growling. And I'm like, oh no. I look, and they kind of stopped, and they all looked at me. And there was like, they looked like they had mange. Something was going on with them. And they did not look like the Doberman or the German shepherds in the neighborhood.
But they're about that size, right?
Bigger. They're that size. They're that size. They see. Were they bigger, Barry? It's tough to say, but they were good size, right? They were scary, especially a group of them, like a pack of them.
Mm-hmm.
And when I got there, it was eerily strange because once they seen me, they stopped. They stopped growling, okay, and howling into the air. And I just kind of drifted past them, and they looked very creepy like. And I went, and my buddy's house was not too far away. And I said, "Hey, man, there's something going on, not too far from your house. Make sure your kids are locked up. Make sure your dog is locked up." And I said, "Let's go back and check this out in a few minutes. Let me have a beer, man. This kind of creeped me. I thought that for sure they were going to take after me, but they did not. And they stopped. They stopped, Barry, and Tex. When they see me, they stopped their growling. So we go back about an hour later, and the dogs are gone. We get out of his truck, and we go. We drove a half a block. So let's just bring the truck. I'm not running in case we have to, take flight. So at the base of the creek, there was a bunch of dead animals, carcasses, possums, squirrels, a plethora of them, and they were just, and you could tell that they were recently fed upon. And I said, Brian, my buddy Brian, I said, I tell you what, I'm telling you, these are dogs, and I know they weren't wolves, I know they weren't coyotes, but what type of animal, a dog, does that? And to this day, that's kind of a mystery.
Yeah, that's weird.
Wow. How many of them were there?
There's probably 4 to 6. It was a small pack. Certainly over 4.
That had been just comforting hard, man.
And this happened, it's happened 19, 18, 20 months ago, probably almost 2 years. But Bear, Pax, everyone listening, haven't seen him since. Have not seen him since, which to me is even weirder. Unless, of course, they just traveled on to another area and found more food or whatever they were looking for.
But it's like you would have heard something. It's just too odd,
Yeah.
The whole thing is odd, just like the whole hellhound thing, Gabriel's hound, and the thing that Sherlock Holmes was supposed to be hunting this type of hellhound too. That's based on the Gabriel's hounds. And, back in like the early 80s, when I was still very, very young, there was this show. And when you and Jessica were doing your show, I thought about this immediately when you talked about this, and you both did. But there was a movie called Wolfen in like the early 80s, starring Albert Finney, with another good movie called Looker, where you can lose missing time. But anyway, but that movie was about the spirit of the wolf itself coming into the city and running around as a pack and attacking people, though. But it was about them being pushed out of their habitat, and the spirit of the wolf itself. I thought that was fascinating. And some of the attacks that you two were talking about seemed to mimic some of that to me. Yeah. Even the theory, even the legend about the Wahilia itself is somewhat similar,
I don't know what to think, but yes, absolutely. I agree 100% with you.
Well, somebody said it. I'm sorry, I don't remember who said it, but and we talk about it all the time, the veil thinning. And I think that veil thinning, what we always call the veil thinning, is it's very possible that it could be that we're in that time of revelation, and those seals or whatever is, opening, and we're seeing the effects of that, and I don't think it's just all these cryptids that we're seeing. I think it's things that are going on in the world, but people have been talking about that for years and years. We're in the end times. Every time that things get a little hinky around the world, you got, that's the end times, and it never has been the end times. But what?
I feel you.
but what if? And I fully believe that we do not count time like those in other realms, the creator, God, however you want to look at it. I don't think we count time or register time the same way they or him does. or her. What if we've been in the end times for all these years and we're just gradually seeing things get worse? Okay. But another part of me is like, okay, if you look around at what's going on now, and if you look back in history, is it really worse? I mean, you've got, in the past, you've got famine, you got millions of people dying. You've had these dictators that killed millions and millions and millions of people. You got world wars going on. You've got the Cold War going on for so many years. We had the time of slavery, the witch trials, all that kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Is it really worse now than it was? Or is it better?
Yeah.
Because it wasn't that long in our history, Barry, that me and you couldn't sit down and have a conversation together.
Very true. Very true.
In today's world, I'm not saying we're going to, guys. Don't take this wrong, but if we wanted to, me and Barry could go get married. I just say the acceptance level of stuff.
It's disconcerting.
It is.
And when I say that, I mean the fact that a lot of people say, no, the light is winning and we're going to win down here. Hopefully, but right now I'm not seeing that. This appears to be a prison planet. It's very hellish down here. It's very dangerous down here. There's great beauty that the Creator has put down here, but some of the incarnating souls here seem like they're from the depths. Some of them can't even feel. They can't even love.
Yeah,
and these are people that are in control of this world. I'm hoping that changes, though, definitely.
But and I still, Barry, I'm going to stick to my guns here because we were talking a little bit about that off air, and like I said, I think those of us out here that are tapped into humanity, that light, that goodness, whatever, you were talking about people that screw each other over. You kind of reap what you sow type thing. I think we are going to be in the minority. Darkness may get let's look at it like a chessboard. The light may not have as many pieces, but we may have the right pieces to win the game. I think darkness has a lot more pawns out there, but we may have a lot more knights, bishops, and queens out there.
I hope so, definitely. I hope so.
I do hope so.
Yeah, it's definitely.
I like that commentary text, and
yeah,
I resonate good with it. I understand that where you're going with that, and we're coming. We got like 15 minutes, and Barry, I did tell people, I marketed that we're talking a little bit about, are we aliens from the future, and we're talking time travel. I kind of want to tie this together a little bit, get your thoughts. I was thinking about the other day about UFOs and aliens, right? We have all these UFO sightings, and I don't say UAP, I say UFO. I'm old school, right?
Mm-hmm.
Do you think that some of these UFOs that are, perhaps we see the orbs in the woods, or we just see the UFO up in the galaxy, the Milky Way, do you think that they were us in the future, in a future paradigm when we talk with time travel? Do you think that there's kind of roaming the landscape of time and space, and do you think that they're perhaps returning, it's us returning from the future to study us in the past?
I've heard that. That came out a lot with the J-Rod thing, and several times it's been purported that the Greys are a portion of humanity in the future, and it's also said that happened in the past, that there was a portion of humanity had to go underground and evolved into these insectoid type of features. Okay, so it's very well possible. honestly, in one of my contacts, I think one of the first beings I came into contact with physically perhaps could have been me in another lifetime long ago. And as immortal souls, we can't remember where all we've incarnated. So I think that's very, very serious to a degree, definitely. I think when dealing with future timelines too, I had even been exposed to the possibility that crop circles, those energized plasma balls that make them, are actually, I think Jessica and I talked about this on one of her shows, that those are actually time travelers from the future coming to those spots for a certain reason, that's like a terraforming and other things. And, that's at a point when do we go beyond the physical body and we evolve beyond that and become more in a conscious state, and we have to have a different container for our consciousness? Is that possibly an energized plasma? Something like that. And are they coming back here to get DNA, raw DNA again? It's, questions of that are always valid and quite possible.
Well,
I don't have all the answers, sadly, but
I was watching a show. A guy just brought up what you just said about orbs being energized plasma. In fact, these orbs were piloted by actual aliens coming down here and again researching our planet again from the future, right? Looking back on the past, so now they can improve whatever they had going on their existing planet, if that makes sense. I know a lot of this gets confusing, right? Talking about it, and it's complex.
Mm-hmm. Well, when looking at the crop circles themselves, and scientifically what Dr. Levengood did with them and what he discovered is that, that there's something called real crop circles. The way the nodes are bent, they're exposed to this high energy plasma that also contains high levels of microwaves and other things that create something called an electron avalanche. And what that does is makes the actually seeds from these crops in the crop circle, once they go dormant when they recover, but once they recover, they yield like double the biofuel, double the grain, whatever it might be. And I mean, that's amazing. And when you really start looking at that scientifically, and some of these crop circles also are free energy designs, you're looking at a way to combat food shortage on this planet. But we're not even hearing about that. Instead we're still worrying about if it's Dave and whoever his name is out there stomping them down. The real circles have scientific things that go with them that those old men definitely weren't doing. Look that up. The electron avalanche involved in crop circles and the nodes and the stalks. It's quite interesting. So.
And before I forget, I would like to thank everybody in chat, but I do want to make special mention for Steve Wolf, Rhonda, and Wink at Me for your awesome super chats tonight. I appreciate that. Text appreciates us. Anytime you leave a super chat for any of our shows, we appreciate that, and it certainly goes unnoticed. Thank you so much for that. So
it goes unnoticed. What are you talking about?
It goes unnoticed. Unnoticed. It says it goes unnoticed, not unnoticed. I talk too fast. It's one of the things I gotta do is slow down my speech sometimes. Just like that.
You can't. It's the Yankee. You can't get rid of it, man.
Thank you. So, Bear, are we future aliens, man? Bottom line, what do you think?
Well, I mean, are we aliens? Period. I guess is the question.
I think we are.
We're certainly not, and especially when looking at something like Sasquatch and how suited they seem to be for this environment. As humanity, we kind of suck, man. We're not we're not designed for this place at all. It takes nothing to terminate us. What does Schwarzenegger used to say? I cannot self-terminate. Down here, yeah, you can. They're pretty damn easy. One other joke, all right? Just to light it up, right? Am I the only person when you think about Hellhounds thinks about the Lost Boys movie and that woman trying to run from the dog and then the mother trying to jump over the so the dog was sorry. I think his name was Thord, right? Thord the Hellhound.
I love the Lost Boys. Anytime I see any animal that's similar to a wolf or I think Lost Boys. Hey, Tex, you have anything to add? I got something. Hey, Tex, if you got anything to add on this, because I have one last final thing I want to ask Barry, which is kind of entertaining, and I think Barry knows what that's going to be to close the show. But Tex,
No, go right ahead, bro.
Your final thing. Well, okay. I just want to make sure you're covered. You got anything you want to ask Barry? Because Barry, this is kind of funny, but not funny. It wasn't funny to you at the time, Barry. I do know that. I remember watching your channel again, Barry Littleton. Subscribe to Barry's channel. He's got great stuff. I mean, great stuff. Great stuff on YouTube. So I was watching in preparation for the shows, watching your stuff, and I've watched it in the past, not just for research, but hyper dimensional resonator. You did 2 videos on it, man, about a time travel machine, and I'd like you to walk us through that journey.
Quickly putting it down, I have an interest in time science anyway, because something happened to me. Yes. Things have been happening to me my whole life. And I had encountered what you could call a doppelganger when I was a kid. I was 7 years old. I was walking home. I saw this brother standing on the bridge. And it turns out in the end, this guy was wearing an outfit that I wound up wearing when I was in college, when I was up at Kansas University visiting some friends. Put it to you like this. It gave me interesting in time science. And when I was recovering from my accident, I was pretty much recovered, but I'm still convalescing a little bit. A friend came by and started talking about the Art Bell show and said, I remember you talking about the guy that said he had a time machine he made on there.
Yeah.
And man, I forgot about that. But then I looked it up. Yeah.
I got Jessica to do that show for me, because that's Madman Markham. That's
another one that was on there. Now him, excuse my language, I thought he was going to fry his testicles. More likely, he had that guy. Yes. This guy's name was Stephen Gibbs.
Okay.
And I wind up hunting down his number, and I gave him a call. Yeah. I just wanted to see about this hyperdimensional resonator that he's talking about, and I was curious. And the first thing happens when he answers the phone. He says, I was wondering, I'd say like 1 or 2 words. I was wondering when I was going to hear from you again. I'm like, from me, what? He goes, well, I sold you that other machine, so I figured you took it and took off. And I'm like, he says, 2 years ago. I said, no, we've never spoken before. And at this point, I can hear him flipping papers. He says, no, I recognize inflections of voices really good, and it's you. He said, you sounded a little older then, but it's you. And he starts saying all this stuff, and and I'm like, okay, yeah, right. And then he throws this out. He says, have you seen your double yet? And that threw me for a loop a little. Okay, I'm not gonna lie to you. And it's something else. He says, I said 2 years ago, at that point then, I said it couldn't have been me. 2 years ago, I was in a coma, recovering from this accident. And he starts asking me, he said, there's something odd about you. I said, what? He said, like, maybe you recovered really quickly and you healed differently and not the way that people expected and things. And I was like, maybe? Why? He goes, that's what it was. Your double was doing something to you and doing something to me. And he started asking me questions, like when I tried to walk towards this brother when I was a kid, and he jumped back, was going, no. Okay, you know what I mean? And point being, that's this machine right here. This thing is the hyperdimensional resonator, all right? And it looks a lot more like, to me, it's got a, what do you call it, rubbing plate on here. It's, what do you call it? Oh, gosh.
It's, yeah, I don't know.
God. I can't think of the devices now they're called, but they're all like that, the type of system like that. So doing real time travel, no.
Right.
But does it interfere with the time fields? Yeah, it does something. Okay. Based on the crystals in it. There's a huge magnet that I don't have with me right now. That thing doesn't even run anymore. That I was very leery to even use this thing at all. Okay, and even try it. And it didn't give me time travel per se, but it did create some weird time skip type of things. And I call this guy up, and one thing, he also sent me all these, I don't have the manuals here, but he sent me about 10 manuals that he also had that were for other time devices and things. And when he sent these, first he calls me, he says, I sent you the machine and it came, but he said, but the journals, my printer ran out of ink and I'll send them to you. Just give me a couple of weeks. But then they come like the next day or something. And I start looking at these. They're really advanced. So I take it down to my friend, this pilot engineer. And I said, look at this stuff. First, tell me I'm not going to fry my balls when I use this machine. And then secondly, excuse my language, fry my testicles. And then secondly, look at these schematics for these other machines and tell me what you think. He's looking at it going, where'd you get this? And I said, oh, it's this weird guy. So I give him a call back and I say, you know, anybody ever told you that your machine doesn't work?
Yeah, right.
You know, but I think I could augment some things to put some closed timeline curves in there. It might do something. And he starts yelling at me. Okay. I don't want to hear that shit from you. He said, my machine doesn't work on you. It's because you're one of those soulless alien hybrids. That's the only reason why my technology wouldn't work on you. And I never told him I had contact. Okay, we never discussed that, right? That's what he's saying. Yeah, and I tried to write him off when he said he used the machine, and he jumped to the Cretaceous period, and he kept saying that the dinosaurs had feathers, and he almost got ate by an Allosaurus. You know, he said, "Oh, don't jump back there. Don't use it to go back there." Then he said he jumped to the pearly gates, and he wasn't let in because he's arguing with St. Peter or somebody like Larry David or something. Whatever, you know. But at that point, I tried to disqualify him as a nut, you know, as a lunatic, until he started saying certain things about my doppelganger and other things. But then when he got mad at me that our last exchange and told me I was a soulless alien hybrid, that's why it didn't work, yada yada, and I wound up hanging up on him and everything. So that's the story with that hyperdimensional resonator. I'm trying to remember what you call all the machines where you can touch with the toggle buttons like this one. It's a name. There's other ones that have been created like the wishing machine and things like that. But that's the story behind that. But it's encountering my own doppelganger that gave me an interest in it. And somehow this guy knew that and threw that out. You know, I was asking things like, hey man, what's the weirdest thing that happened? He said, you want to know? He goes, I sold one of those hyperdimensional resonators to Rod Serling.
Oh,
I said, Rod Serling. Really? He said, yeah.
Serling.
He goes, man, the timeline I come from, there was no Twilight Zone series. And then I was like, yeah, okay. And I'm trying to giggle a little like you guys are, okay?
Yeah,
and he said, have you ever watched the original Twilight Zones? I said, yeah, I've seen them all. And he's like, have you ever noticed that a lot of them are about time travel?
Yeah.
Good one. You know, good comeback.
Yeah.
Anyway, that's my story with the great hyperdimensional resonator. Like if I were to turn it on, the magnet, and on those videos, you can see it makes the watch go crazy. So it interferes with the time fields a little with the crystals and magnets and all that. But
in fact,
it's not going to take you to the pearly gates.
Yeah, you know, Barry, I had to bring that up because I watched you have 2 videos on that, and of course, with all due respect, I mean, I knew where you were going because of the doppelganger and such, but then as you go on talking about this guy, and he even had a compartment where you could put like a screw in there to maybe transport that somewhere, and apparently that probably didn't work. Yeah, you know, so and then and then you broke open and you showed us the inside. It looked like something you bought from Radio Shack. And I'm again making fun of you. I just thought that was great that you bought that.
Well, you know, he cut me a deal for it. I paid like $75. I think he's charging everybody else like $400 or something.
Jeez,
man. So
wow.
you know, I had $75. I could have got my brakes fixed on my car, so I sacrificed that.
Well,
but
you know,
just my curiosity is too high on it. You know,
the $75 got you a hell of a lot of views on the 2 videos, so at least you got something out of the deal, right?
Oh, I got stalked over those, man. People were all over me. Send it to me if you don't want it. I'm like, oh my gosh. Come on.
Oh, boy. You know, this has been a great show, Barry. You know, I'm so glad you came on. Thank you, Tex, for joining. And Barry, you know, Barry Littleton on YouTube. Anything else you'd like to pass on where we can find you or anything else that maybe you have coming up in the future?
Yeah, I have. I'm actually on YouTube a lot. I've got a YouTube channel, Barry Littleton. I'm also on Patreon, and my website is barrylittleton.com. It's forever in needing of redesign and all that, but you can catch me on Facebook also under Barry Littleton. I will actually be speaking at an event, and I'll start advertising it. It'll be in Sedona on, I believe, December 12th to the 17th. I'll start advertising it. It's going to be called the Starseed Retreat or something like that. It sounds like it's going to be a really nice event, and I'm looking forward to it. Every time I get invited to any of these conferences, I've really enjoyed the time speaking to the attendees and people that are there. I think that's what they're about, and kind of breaking this veil that we have going on. So,
no, man, you're packed full of information. Again, Barry's channel is packed full of information. Barry's a smart guy. He knows a lot, and I appreciate. I learned a lot. I know Tex did as well, and I know our audience did. If you're listening later, thank you. If you're listening into the future, if you're going to listen in the past, well, thank you. You probably saw it already. You probably knew the time of the show prior to this. I love it. Thank you very much, Barry. Everybody in chat once again, thank you. A shout out to Steve Wolf, Rhonda, and Wink at Me for the great super chats. Barry Littleton, thank you, my man. It was a pleasure. Until next time, BMR signing out for Tex and Barry on Beyond BMR. I got to find the appropriate button. I think I got it, Tex. I think I got it.